Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Harry Sherrard, and on behalf of the Talks team, very warm welcome to our first talk of 2025. Great to see so many of you here to see the living legend that is Richard Noble. Hope lots of you are members. If you're not members of Brooklands, we'd love you to join. And our outreach colleagues are at the back selling lots of lovely Brooklands memorabilia as well. So we'll have a Q&A at the end, but without any further ado from me, big warm welcome, please, for Richard Noble.
Yep, ready to go. That's the thing, right? Well, what a lot of people. Isn't this fantastic? Thank you so much for coming. I wonder what the hell you've all come for, but I hope you'll enjoy this because this is really very interesting. It's a long time since we broke some records, and the interesting thing is that as you look back on them and study them more and more, you realize just how lucky you were to be able to be part of something like this, and also to actually come back with a world record. So that's what we do. And a world record, remember, is not just like winning a Formula One race or anything like that. It's achieving the greatest performance that's ever been done by anyone in the world. And the publicity, of course, lasts for absolutely ever. It's 40 years, of course, since the Thrust 2 record, and people still talk about it. It's absolutely amazing. Formula One, of course, it's only one race. That's how long it lasts. But here, this thing lasts for years and years and years. Another great thing about it, too, is that we can share it. We can share the technology. In the directly competitive world of Formula One, you can't actually share the real technology behind it. But we see a good reason for doing this, and I'll come forward to that in a moment. Okay, this presentation is actually a little unusual because it's an early preview of what we're trying to do. We spent 4 years on development of the water speed record program. We wasted 2 of them because we went in the wrong direction. And then gradually we began to learn more and more and more. And it's become an absolutely fascinating program, but it's a very, very big one. And it's a very, very difficult program indeed. Almost as difficult, if not more, than breaking the sound barrier as we did. So it's nice to see all the old faces again in the audience. And if you look around, you'll see Andy Green there somewhere. I hope he's there, yeah? Give him a chair, because that was Andy, that was, when I look back on it, a fantastic personal achievement. I mean, absolutely fantastic. And hopefully it'll last forever, because I think the Americans are a little bit windy about going supersonic. So we'll see, anyhow. I'd like to thank our watch sponsor, basically Brooklands Watches, for their very generous help with this project. This is a very complex and very demanding project. It really is, as we get into it now, it's just like breaking the sound barrier again. It's on that sort of scale. And it's a very tough call on any sponsor, because we're now at the point where we've got to prove that it actually works. We've done all the years of our IT work, particularly with our friends at Kinetic, who've done all the hydrodynamics, and with the various universities, in particular Leeds University, who's done an enormous amount of work on all the aerodynamics. And it's coming together. You can feel it's coming together. People are starting to get excited about it, but we've still got a long way to go. So let me just remind you that if your lucky partner is thinking of buying you a beautiful watch, then don't go for Rolex, because they all look the same. Go and talk to Simon here and get a really nice Brooklands watch. Beautiful. Andy and I have got them on today. Okay, and also with us today, do make a point of talking to Robert Burnell of PRF. Robert is a very, very brave friend who, at the very early days of the project, decided he was going to support the project with all the composites, not only for the models and making of all the models, but also for the big boat, which is known as C6. So this is a hell of a thing to decide right at the early days. And it's a wonderful relationship. It's all about, of course, about innovation, And Robert's about innovating too. He's spent 40 years of innovating in the composites industry. Sadly today, our designer, Lorne Campbell, can't be with us. He's gone down with something awful. But hopefully he'll be back again. I sent him a mail the other morning and said, Lorne, look, this is all very well, but we're starting to get into testing now. What are we going to do about this? Do you want to stand in? And I get a response that said, not bloody likely. He said, I'm coming back. So he's coming back, which is great. Also helping us this evening is Andrew Bradley. And Andrew is basically our technical director. I think probably the best description of Andy is his wife, Sarah, and Sarah's here somewhere, who simply said that Andy spent his whole life on Rolls-Royce, and this was just in preparation for this project. And in these projects, you've got to have somebody who's really, really strong on the engineering. And of course, we were very fortunate to have Ron Ayres with the Thrust SSC and Bloodhound projects. And we're very fortunate to have Andrew. This is going to be a great success. And if you look around too, you'll see my old friend Robin Richardson. And Robin has been with us since Thrust SSC. He built up the Mach 1 Club. Are there any old Mach 1 members here? Yeah, we got a few. I think we had some 15,000 at one stage. And they were actually the second largest sponsor of the entire Thrust SSC project. So it was a wonderful achievement, absolutely wonderful achievement. Okay, so what I'm going to do is going to tell you a bit of the history of this and give you some sort of idea of what it's like trying to do something like this. Some people see it as a form of madness, but I see it as a fight, a bloody great fight. You've got to somehow support your team and get it through from the start right the way through to the finish. And you never know how it's going to go. There's no logic path on a thing like this. It's just completely different. You've got to fight by day and win. Okay, so I'm going to start right at the beginning when, in point of fact, 1980. So let's just see if I can actually work these slides. Where are we? There we are. Which is that one? Yep. Okay, 1980, yeah. This was an extraordinary moment. It's 1986, and we created this new airplane, the ARV Super 2. A huge battle against appalling odds, particularly the Civil Aviation Authority. But eventually, we got them to certificate the airplane transport category, so it could be used for hire and reward and used for training. The market for this airplane is around about 20,000 units, replacing all the old American Cessnas. Much, much better airplane, lovely handling, and I flew 3 of them into Heathrow, so I still got Heathrow in my logbook. It's very interesting. It gives you an idea of what you're up against. So somewhere along the line, we got to hear from the Department of Trade and Industry. And they said, we might be able to give you an innovation grant. And we said, well, that'd be really interesting. Please, yeah, money's seriously difficult. And they said, yeah, well, we have this wonderful deal where we will buy 3 copies of your product and put them into the marketplace and find out what people think of it. And I thought, fantastic, that's exactly what we want. So I worked very hard putting all the paper together and everything else, and I had the next meeting with a guy in Victoria, and he said, we've changed our mind. I said, what do you mean you've changed your mind? Well, we've changed your mind. He said, we're not going to give you 3 airplanes. So I said, what sort of game do you think you're playing in here? I mean, we're playing a real game. There's a market for 20,000 of these airplanes out there, and you're not going to help. And he said, well, what you've got to do is fill in our book, which is a great book of documentation. I said, I'm not bloody doing that because frankly it's going to take up an enormous amount of time, and we need that time to making money. So basically, we parted company, and we have achieved the full certification. And as I say, I flew 3 aircraft here into Heathrow. And there's the president of the CAA handing over this document. And this is a fantastic thing to achieve because the team had done it. We'd done everything. We'd proven everything. And with a new airplane, with an airplane with its wings sweep forwards, with fantastic handling and performance and everything. But of course, it was going to be very difficult to get it in the marketplace, but we got on with it. Anyhow, I love that airplane. I used to use it as a car. I used to fly it everywhere. I got about 500 hours on it. And then, unfortunately, many years later, back in 2005, this happened. We got an engine failure, a very complex engine failure, which meant that I couldn't just glide it down and put it down in a field like you would expect to. But basically, it meant that I had to come in to land like the space shuttle. Very steep dive, and then of course the problem is, when do you actually pull out? You can either pull out too early or too late. I left it too late, and we had a bloody great smash. So that was the end of my airplane, which was very sad. And I thought about this, and I realized that this is the second big crash I'd had, and I realized that this is going to kill me sooner or later. The odds are against you, big, big time. In terms of, the engineering, are you going to get some sort of fault that brings you down, or is it the weather, or is it an air traffic control problem? These things can absolutely, they can kill you. It's really as simple as that. So I decided I'd change, and just to show you that I got a bit of interest in boats, I bought a boat. Okay, this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. It took 2 years to find the ideal boat, and I found it it's called an old Combat 90E, a Swedish patrol boat, which I found in Bodø in Norway. I went up there to meet up with the Norwegian guys trying to sell it. We got mightily pissed that night, and the result of which was I got the price down by 30%. And that was good. It's a wonderful choice because it's got a carbon fiber hull. It's propelled by a Kamiwa FF410 water jet driven by an enormous Scania 14-litre truck diesel, and it goes 50 miles an hour. It's a fantastic thing. But I got to learn hard how to use it. And one of the best conversations I had was with the Swedish Design Authority who designed it. And they said the military were unhappy that it was built too light, so they made it a lot heavier. And they said, there's one thing about this, Richard, you will never, ever break it. So I thought, that's fine, that's a good start. Okay, I took some time to learn how to drive it because water jet-powered boats are difficult to drive, and I was a real danger to the traffic, the boat traffic on the Thames, but eventually I got there. And fortunately, one of the original design team was in London, and he taught me how to drive it. And it's a fantastic piece of machinery because basically you can make a right-angled turn at 35 knots. In other words, it's about 40 miles an hour in just 30 meters. Okay, you just go like that. And it'll stop from 35 knots in a dead stop in 1.5 lengths. This is my sort of boat. I really, really enjoy this thing. I love it to bits. Anyhow, I put this in just to reassure that I have some limited experience, but very limited experience on boats. Well, we talked about world record breaking, and record breaking is all about innovation. You can't do what the other people have done. You simply can't, because you might never get there. Your product may not be fast enough. It may not get there. You've got to innovate. You've got to take a big gamble and change it and come back with something completely different. Because otherwise, you're going to spend an awful lot of your time and an awful lot of other people's money and just not get there. And of course, as we know, Britain is a funny sort of woke country at the moment. We don't like risk, which is wonderful. This is absolutely it, because we're into high risk. We love risk. We work with risk. And of course, you know that we broke the sound barrier and all the rest. Okay, so all this started way back in 1952 when, as a kid of 6, I peered over a wall at Drumnadrockit's Temple Pier on Loch Ness. And I was lucky enough to see John Cobb's jet boat Crusader. So here we have a picture of the Crusader. Now you imagine a 6-year-old kid seeing this. Wow, isn't this fantastic? What an amazing piece of kit. How does it work? It's jet-powered. It's the first jet-powered boat that's been really designed from scratch as a jet-powered boat. And it's going to take the world water speed record, which was 178 miles an hour. It's driven by a brilliant guy called John Cobb, who held the world land speed record, just under 400 miles an hour. This was something. And I thought to myself, this is really interesting. I mean, John Cobb has a boat like this, and my dad has a Hillman Minx car. How does this happen? So there was a fantastic process in the middle of this. Unfortunately, 2 or 3 days later, I think Cobb got out of control, and he ended up driving the boat at over 240 miles an hour. He got carried away. It was very difficult to read his instruments because of the position of the instruments in the panel. And secondly, of course, because it's a planing boat, has terrific acceleration. And I think he lost control. He ended up at 240 miles an hour, and the boat broke up, and he was killed. Very sad. A great man was lost. But as a 6-year-old, I'd seen this beautiful boat, and it had the potential, and I was just hugely, hugely impressed. So how do you kind of start on all this? Well, basically, I built that. Bloody dangerous. I mean, seriously dangerous. Did I know what I was doing? No, not at all. But I was on my own, and I worked away and somehow got the skills and put it all together, powered by a very early jet engine. And of course, in due course, we had a horrific crash with a triple airborne roll and so on. It really smashed up. Fortunately, it was a centrifugal engine, so the centrifugal engine is quite broad, and that took all the bump. So I was okay. I fell out of it. I learned an awful lot from it, an enormous amount from it. Now I wanted to move on to the next one, Thrust 2. So we sold the remains of Thrust 1 that afternoon to a scrappy in South London for 175 quid. And so that was our starting budget for the next project, Thrust 2. Okay, now you've got to realize that the thing about these projects is that this is not not funded by wealthy people. This is actually, you've got to earn your money. And it's very important to start your project with virtually nothing, so that the first people who come on board and join it really are the founder sponsors, and they can take a lot of glory for doing, just like, for instance, Brooklands watches, and of course our good friend Robert Burnell. Anyhow, Thrust 2, we moved on to do Thrust 2, and it's quite a car, so I won't spend too much time on it, but here we go. This is absolutely what we wanted. Basically, it weighs 4 tons. It's got 35,000 horsepower, and it's capable of accelerating at 2G. So that's 0 to 90 miles an hour in just over 2 seconds. So it's a really sensible piece of machinery. It's powered by an engine from a Lightning fighter, and it took an awful long time to learn how to do it. And also during the process, we had a really bad crash where we had to rebuild the car. But we kept going somehow. We had enormous problems with the British industry, particularly the insurance industry. We actually had a bit of a problem, and it's a rather nice little story, actually. What happened there was we were on the Bonneville Salt Flats, and it was fantastic. The day before was fantastic. We got 500 miles an hour, okay, just for a second. On the run, an average of, I can't remember, it was 418 or 420 or something. And there's a wonderful feeling, hey, we can do this, we can do this. We've got 500 miles an hour. And the next day, that night, it rained and the place flooded. And of course, what we'd done was we'd basically insured Bonneville against pluvious insurance. For those of you who are in the insurance industry, basically pluvious insurance is what the church faiths use, just in case it rains and wrecks their fate. So I put our last £1,000 down at 75 to 1. And then the insurance companies decided they weren't going to pay. So I said, look, here it is on BBC. You can see it on television. Here it is. You can see the place is flooded. Where's the money? And there was a terrible silence. So I called a sponsors meeting. And the insurance director was there, and we all sat down, and I said, I'm calling a sponsors meeting. I'm calling a public meeting to announce the next stage of the project. And the insurance man said, well, what are you going to do about the insurance? And I said, well, it's very straightforward. Either you're going to pay up or you're not. If you are going to pay up, I'm going to praise you to the skies. If you're not going to pay up, I'm going to hand out basically our insurance documentation to all the press and see what they say about it. You wouldn't do that, he said. See, I bloody would, I said. And on the day, he turned up with a curious leather envelope, and inside was a check for 75,000. So we kept going. Thank you, insurance company. Okay, so that was a hell of a thing. On the 4th of October, we finally got the world land speed record. It was a very close-run thing, and only as you get older and wiser, you realize just what a close-run thing it was. So imagine, there we are on the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. We've got a 13-mile track, and we start off on the first run. And my very good friend, Ken Norris, who sadly is no longer with us, basically was managing us on site. And so much of this record was due to his management and his care. Anyhow, so there we are. We race down the track, and we've got to get an average of 629 miles an hour through the measured mile. And we do our best, but the north end of the course is very draggy and dusty and so on. So it's a bit of it's pretty difficult to get the speed. And we got 624. So everybody's face dropped. This thing was known to be marginal, and basically we'd only got 624. Now we've got to make the obligatory second run. And we repositioned the car on the hard south end of the course, okay, and we started refueling it, rearming it, and checking it all over before we made the second run. And suddenly an extraordinary thing happened. There was a huge black cloud over us, and the temperature was low, and it was, and suddenly this cloud just sort of disappeared, and the sun came out, and the temperature, because we're very high at 4,000 feet, the temperature rocketed up to 75 degrees. And, of course, this helps us because this is all about the speed of sound. John Ackroyd, our designer, was sure that basically what was actually happening here was this car was speed limited by the speed of sound. So what was happening was he reckoned our capability was Mach 0.84. And if the speed of sound goes up, then, of course, Mach 0.84 means a lot more speed in miles per hour. So off we went. We didn't realize quite what was happening. Certainly I didn't. I just pedaled to the metal and went for it. And we got a peak speed of 650 miles an hour and 642 miles an hour through the measured mile. So 642 plus the 624 gave us an average of 633, and we got the world record. So everybody was absolutely thrilled. We got the world record. The timekeepers had told us we got the world record. And it was exciting. It was a wonderful time. It had taken 9 years of hard graft to actually get this thing. But we got it, and that was that. Well, there was, of course, a bit of risk in all this. And basically what happened was, it wasn't until we got the dinner that night that we got the data out of the car. In those days, everything was very, very primitive. And we discovered that the car was very near flying. And basically, here we are, we have a shot of the car at speed. And there's the graph. And you can see what's happening. The load is coming off very, very fast. John Ackroyd reckoned we were between 7 and 8 miles an hour of taking off. I couldn't feel that in the car at all. I was happily driving along. It all seemed perfectly normal to me, but it was bloody dangerous. We got away with it. We got the world land speed record. So, and we held it for another 14 years. The next challenge target was, of course, Mach 1. But before that, we had an interesting interlude. About this time, the civil servant who'd told us that he wasn't going to allow us to claim 3 airplanes for the grant that he'd promised, suddenly rang me up. And he said, I've retired. And I thought, well, thank God for that. He can't cause any more damage. That's good. So he said, I'd love to come and see the airplane. One of the problems was, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned it, was when we got the airplane flying, we did the new airplane, it's a metal airplane, with a new aero engine, and we got it into the air in 13 months. So when I showed him videos of this, right in those early days, he said to me, you didn't do that. You're lying, you're cheating. That's somebody else's airplane. And he was absolutely sent on that. And obviously we couldn't work together with a guy like that. Anyhow, so what happened then was he rang up. He said he wanted to see the aeroplane. So I said, fine, we're all down at Farnborough. Come down to Farnborough, I'll take you flying. So I put him in the aeroplane, and I flew him around the south of England and flew him back again. It was a funny sort of flight because he didn't talk very much about it. We landed back at Farnborough, parked the aeroplane, and he walked off. Not good company, and on a flight, and he went off deep, deep in thought. We never heard anything more. Anyhow, right, we move on. As you know, our good friend Craig Breedlove, who's crashed every car he's ever driven, and he's an amazing guy, and sadly is no longer with us. It's really sad that these people are disappearing now. Craig Breedlove was set about building a supersonic car. And Craig basically does his own thing, so he doesn't have a computer or anything like that. He just basically designs it as he thinks fit. It's called empirical design, which is bloody dangerous. Anyhow, and also so there was he getting on with that, and the McLaren Formula One team were underway, and they were underway with this, which was the Maverick. And I took a look at this, and I thought, oh, Christ, no. Do they really know what they're doing? And they went running around telling everybody how wonderful they were and how they got 25 million to spend and all this sort of stuff. And we had no money. And basically all we could do is see this huge program sort of moving forward. But of course, what we didn't realize was that we had the edge. Absolutely we had the edge because of one person, the late Ron Ayres. Ron Ayres, MBE, who had thrown in his lot with us. It was a wonderful thing to do. He was a hugely capable guy, and he took control of the engineering of the project straight away. And we together, we put together this program, and we produced Thrust SSC. 10-ton car with 100,000 horsepower, so 10,000 horsepower per ton, and it's called Thrust SSC. And all our project names are designed to tell you what we're trying to do. So Thrust SSC, Thrust Supersonic Car. Okay, so there's a fascinating interlude here because it's 1991 and Ron decided to use the new computational fluid dynamics aero software, which had never been used on a car. We were about 10 years ahead of Formula One. And he decided to validate the CFD with rocket model testing. This was an enormously brave thing to do. I mean, it really was. This is completely new technology, but Ron decided this is what he was going to do. So he got going with the CFD, which was done by Swansea University, and did a wonderful job on all that. And then it came to rocket testing at Pendyne in South Wales. And Ron did a fantastic sales job on them, so much so that when I turned up there, they were absolutely sold on the whole thing. And they said, it's a funny thing, Richard, but we do have some 200 2-inch strafing rockets lying around. They're not quite time expired, but very nearly, and would you like to use them? Yes, please. And so we built the rocket test bed, and then we moved ahead to do the testing. So we've got a bit of video here. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before, but it always requires to be shown again. There we go. Now, the important thing here is when the rocket goes, do not blink. It's important not to blink. So here's the model here on the rails. Here's the sled with the 18 rockets for acceleration, 4 for deceleration, stop it. Otherwise, of course, it'll end up in London. 0 to 820 miles an hour in 0.8 of a second. Right. This is what it's all about. So I'll shut up and just watch this, but don't blink.
One puffer only functioned, wait.
Well, we had great fun. We worked our way through 200 rockets. And then an extraordinary thing happened because Ron disappeared. He wasn't his normal chatty self. He sort of disappeared off the screen, and we were trying to deal with various other things. And what had happened was he now put the data from the rocket test onto the same data that we'd got from the CFD. And he produced this famous document. So basically, we had a graph now which showed the performance of the CFD against the rocket, and it was a straight line correlation. And the extraordinary thing about this is all over the world, people were looking for an opportunity to actually correlate CFD data with actual real-time data. And Ron did it, and he provided it then to Swansea University, and Swansea University got some enormous contracts from Airbus. And so, jolly good, great result. And well done, Ron. About this time, we ran into trouble again with the Department of Trade and Industry. Now, what can I say about this? What I can say is these people are incredibly important. They are incredibly valuable, and they're absolutely hopeless. So what happened was they got to Ron. They discovered Ron. And they said to Ron, if you work with us, etc., and fill in all our forms and everything else, we'll give you a 20% grant towards the building of Thrust SSC. And so Ron rang me up and said, look, we simply got to do this, Richard. It's a wonderful opportunity. I said, no, Ron, it isn't a wonderful opportunity. These people are absolutely hopeless, and they'll never, ever deliver. I'm sorry, I'm very, very biased, and I don't want to spend a lot of time filling in their ruddy forms, because basically I can make the money faster from sponsorships than they can. So Ron was very upset about this, and he convinced me that we better go and have a meeting with the government there in their place, very smart building in Victoria. So we went there, and they duly told us that a grant of 20% was quite possible if we filled in all their forms. So we listened to all this, and then outside of the office, we were out in the street, and I stopped Ron and said, look, Ron, I can't go ahead with this, Ron. I really can't. I don't believe in these people. I think they will mess us up. And my heart's not in it. I've got to deal with the sponsorship in the real world. And he said, well, I believe it'll go ahead. I mean, they've told us 20%, Richard. I mean, this... I said, listen, Ron, you've run business before. Why don't you do it? And I think you'll have a much better chance than I ever will. So why don't you do it? Yeah, fine, said Ron. I'll do it. Jolly good, Ron. Let's hope we get 20%. Anyhow, there was a sort of awful silence for, I suppose, about a month. And then the story came back from Ron, and it was very interesting. The department called Ron on the phone, and in an incredibly arrogant voice, the executive said, Mr. Ayres, if you are doing your project properly, you can give us all the following project information. In other words, the arrogance of this thing was just unbelievable. I mean, whether the man had ever done a project like that in his life, I have no idea, but there you go. So Ronnie did his best with the answers, and the interrogator replied saying, Mr. Ayres, thank you very much for all your answers, but there's one answer that I need before I can go forward. And Ron said, fine, okay, well, what's that? He said, I need to know how many of these supersonic cars you're going to build in the first year. And Ron, bless him, did the most obvious thing, and he slammed the phone down. And that was that. There was no answer to that. Ron had saved us a vast amount of time and hope, and Thrust SSC had no further trouble from the department. But think if they really had been able to give us 20%. I don't think for a moment that the organisation would be capable of doing that. And as we've discovered with other projects, they always fail. But the department always fails. But it would have been wonderful, and they could have helped us enormously, but they didn't. In those early days, also, we were involved with Formula One, and Formula One was very dangerous. Not just for the drivers, because there's almost no safety cult there. And it was seen that one of Formula One things was that it was a bit like war, that you were supposed to die if things went wrong. And it was a very frightening scenario. It was frightening because they just didn't bother with the safety culture until, of course, various people got going and eventually sorted it out. But also, there was an almost total financial dependence on cigarette sponsorships. which has plainly induced the fans to smoke the promotional brands. That's what it was all about. Of course it was. Every year they had to sell more cigarettes to replace the people who had died. And in due course, they were going to kill a lot of their fans. Of course, the brands assured everybody who'd listened that there was no linkage between cigarettes and the big C. Many, including us, just didn't believe that. So that was absolutely fascinating. When we announced the success of the Thrust to Sea project and Andy broke the sound barrier, we told the Formula One world we'd done it without any cigarette sponsorship, without even one fag. That didn't go down at all well, but time, but Formula One began to change. Whether we had any say in that, I have no idea, but at least we made the point. So there we are back on the desert. We're developing the record. And our friend Craig Breedlove got into trouble. And this was an amazing accident.
It's vital they prove their car quickly because they have a rival. American Craig Breedlove, who is ahead in the race. His car has already got within 100 miles per hour of the sound barrier, a speed the British team can only dream of. But this is dangerous and unknown territory. On Breedlove's last run on the American Black Rock Desert, his car suddenly flipped on its side and careered off course at 670 miles per hour.
Jesus, God almighty.
Miraculously, it righted itself again, and Breedlove was unhurt. Now, he's rebuilding for the battle with Noble in the autumn.
Okay, well, this is an extraordinary story. Craig Breedlove, a very, very brave and gutsy guy, and he was on the desert the year before us, and he was doing his best. And his car was something which he had designed himself. There was not a computer in sight. And he went roaring down the track and gradually got faster and faster and faster. And he started to get up to into the 600s. And then an extraordinary accident at 675 miles an hour. We've no idea which really happened, but we can take a guess. And what seemed to happen was he developed a shockwave under one of his wings. The car itself had two wings which supported the wheels. He got a shockwave under them. Maybe one of the wings was slightly different size to the other or something like that. Only needs to be a few millimeters out. He got this terrific shockwave, and it raised the car onto its side at 675 miles an hour. And the wheel, which is at the end of the wing, basically was, of course, a gyro. And it held the car up like that. It was the most extraordinary thing you ever saw. And so it did a whole circle. It did our 180. It literally turned around on it, came back on itself, and ground itself to the halt. Fortunately, Craig was all right. Craig, of course, immediately went out in a tent and went to a sponsor's meeting in America. But, of course, his car was ruined. Okay, and we pushed on, and we got it. But basically, it wasn't quite as easy as all that. Okay, we did 2 development sessions in the Al Jafra Desert in Jordan, thanks to the late King Hussein, who helped. And we then were going fast at long last on the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. As we neared Mach 1, Andy grew very concerned that we might have a problem with our active ride software. So the whole idea of the active ride was basically to raise the tail as the car speed increased. In other words, the car was going to generate lift, and if we would raise the tail, we'd generate more and more downthrust, and we could counteract the lift. That was the idea. But Andy was worried that there was a real problem in this, and that in the software, which might mean that the software might drop the back of the car. And if it dropped the back of the car, Andy would fly. So this was a very nasty situation. It caused a lot of trouble within the team. Everybody got very worked up about it. But we got over it. It was a good old crisis. We got over it. And the team quickly got the rear suspension restricted, and we were on safe then to continue. It was a huge moment when that sound barrier was broken. So from my own point of view, I was standing in the midpoint of the course with all the media. And basically, we had about 200 media there. They all got their cameras out, and they were absolutely fascinated by this thing. And as the car started on its run, there was a terrible, terrible silence. There was even a man there who specialized in accidents. When I discovered him, I told him, well, you'd better go home because I was ready. He's not going to see an accident here. But there we go. And then you see Andy in the car coming up like a huge black locomotive, faster than any airplane you've ever seen. Absolutely in complete silence. And you're thinking, my God almighty, what an extraordinary thing. Crikey, is he going to survive? This is going to be all right. And, of course, he did. So let's have a look at the video.
Straight up as fast. All clear to shoot well. Yes, we got it. Everything is going to be wonderful. FSC, the car is stopped. Mile 13.5.
FSC copies. At station standby. FSC has stopped mile 13.5.
What a simply fantastic achievement by a little team of people. Interestingly enough, basically our total spend was just on 4 million quid. And our McLaren had budgeted 25. We did it, they didn't. It was a huge team achievement, and it's a teamwork. Andy will tell you about it. It's extraordinary teamwork. Everybody looking after their particular bit of this project, all working together to integrate it. And it worked, and it absolutely worked. And the pressure on the team was fantastic. Not so long ago, Jerry Bliss and Ron Ayres were telling me that their job was to follow the car on its run. And Jerry, who was very sensitive to all this, was saying, we're absolutely terrified doing this because we don't know what to expect when we get to the far end of the course. Of course, when they got to the far end of the course, they met Andy with a huge grin on his face. The shock wave was terrific. It could be heard 40 miles away. It knocked the covers off the sprinklers and classroom sprinklers in the local school. And the media coverage was unbelievable. We had the largest website in the world for several days. The Microsoft people who were sponsoring us were a bit surprised by all this, but there we are. And it was a huge team achievement, and the media coverage went to 150 countries, and the supersonic record still stands today, 27 years later. But as I say, one of the most important parts of all this is we hadn't hurt anybody, and we hadn't taken the tobacco sponsorship money. So there you go. So here's the famous picture of the shockwave. I hope that's going to work. There we go. And this was a hell of a moment. It was taken from one of the microlights, and it had rained the day before, so the desert was slightly dark, and you could see that the shockwave was turning over the upper surface. What an achievement. Right. Now, the project, yes. So we move on now to the next stage, which was Bloodhound. Now, we were very fortunate in the sense that the Americans decided they were going to challenge us. And this was the late and great Steve Fossett. And Steve Fossett made his money in Chicago, and he had 110 world records, which include a lot of swimming and flying, and he flew non-stop 1.5 times around the world. I mean, it was amazing what this guy could do. And I decided what we'd try and do is take him on. It would give us an opportunity to build one more car and perhaps really push the boundaries just that little bit further. So we got underway with this, and it became an enormous project, capable of Mach 1.4, that's 1,000 miles an hour. And Ron and I put together the design of this thing, and it was to be the perfect land speed record car powered by a Eurofighter engine, and we'll talk about that in a moment, and a Nammo hybrid rocket motor. It took 12 years and £31 million to fund the car, to get the car. And we did all that from zero cash. So it was a hell of a fight. And sadly, in the middle of all this time, Steve Fossett was killed in a light aircraft flying accident in California, and we lost our Challenger, which was a real shame. But we got so far with the project, obviously we couldn't just walk away from it. We got to finish the job. Well, we got it built. But in the middle of all this, an extraordinary thing happened because we needed a bit more help from the Ministry of Defence. And Andy set up a meeting with the Director of Defence Equipment and Support. And it didn't go very well. Andy and I turned up in this enormous office in Whitehall. We sat down on his enormous sofa. And anyhow, it was a friendly meeting, but it clearly wasn't going to go anywhere. And so obviously we got to call an end to the meeting because we were just wasting everybody's time. So we got up to go and we thanked him for the meeting and we went to the door and he stopped us. He stopped us at the door. It was like a television scene, film. He stopped us. He said, "Hang on a moment, there's something you can do for us." So I thought, great, trading situation. We could do something for him and maybe he could help us. So I said, fine, okay. And so he went on to explain they were having very big problems with the education quality of their recruits. He referred to the 1960s when their country was building Concorde. Neil Armstrong was headed for the moon and there was a huge interest in engineering. But by 2012, basically the enthusiasm had gone into decline. So it was very simple. The Ministry of Defence asked us to set up an education program to share the project data and experience with UK schools and restart public enthusiasm in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We did just that, and by 2016 we were engaged with over 120,000 students and school kids a year. The project had achieved real social value, which we'd always looked forward to trying to achieve, and we were making massive progress. So there is a rule about record breaking, which is basically what happens is you get nearer and nearer to running the car or the boat or whatever, the sponsors get very twitchy. Basically at the board level they're saying, oh, what happens if it crashes and it's got our name on it and all this sort of stuff. And we were running out of funds. And basically we got to take the car to South Africa, where the South Africans had built us a fantastic track. 1,000 man-years had gone into this. And they'd picked up by hand 1,600 tons of stones. I mean, it was just a huge, massive thing. And anyhow, so we put the car on display in the city. So here's the picture of it on display in the city. And 8,000 people came in 2 days. Obviously, the city is where the money is, and so let's see what we can do. We failed dismally. We sold 60,000 quid worth of merchandise, but there was no sponsorship. We'd failed. And we were in huge trouble now because, of course, the problem was that we were running out of money. We didn't have enough money to fund the record attempt. The whole thing was getting very difficult. So in desperation, I wrote a letter to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. He'd been down to see us. I'd never actually met him. But he'd come down. His kids had brought him down to Bristol to see the car. And I sent him a letter. And I said, George, we're in real trouble. We're going to lose this thing. I can't keep the cash flow up. And it seems such a shame. And we're also having a huge success with the education. And I think there's real value. And Osborne responded by setting up an enormous program to decide whether the project was of value to the country. So he decided he was going to do this. I wrote back and said, look, we'll make absolutely everything available to you. All the accounts, all the figures, all the engineering, the lot. And so basically that's how the thing started to develop. In the meantime, we had an extraordinary situation where we managed to get an enormous deal in China from one of the major car companies there. And this was terrific. All we needed now was for the government to come forward with its deal, and basically we could go. It was really as simple as that. So it was all coming together. It was a very, very exciting moment. And we were actually going to achieve this. I mean, you know, you scratch your head and you wonder, bloody hell, how the hell have we done this? But it's all happening. It's all really happening. And so I commuted backwards and forwards to China, and eventually we got the contract signed, and the first tranche of money paid, 4 million, I think it was. It was really good. It was wonderful. And then what happened was George Osborne's project came to some sort of a conclusion. And the next thing was we had a letter from the transport minister offering a very vague and complex letter, which I didn't really understand, but offering effectively £4 million and basically giving a whole list of the conditions that were important to achieve. And I roared with laughter because we could meet all the conditions immediately. So I called a meeting with the civil servants in Whitehall, and we sat down and we passed across all the contracts and all the documentation and everything. And we said, great, thank you for the offer. Can we have our money, please? And there was a terrible silence, absolutely awful silence. And we didn't know how to interpret this at all. It was just extraordinary. I mean, normally when you have a situation when you're given some sort of contract, some sort of challenge like this and you achieve it, everybody's thrilled, absolutely thrilled, but not this lot. And they literally ran away. We had nothing more from them. We couldn't contact them. We could send them emails. What's happening about the deal? Where are you? No, nothing. Phone calls were not answered. And they'd run away. So this was an absolutely appalling condition. So I had to then get on a plane to China and go and talk to the Chinese and say, look, I'm very, very sorry, but unfortunately, Britain has defaulted on its own contract, on its own offer. And the Chinese were very honourable and very understanding. Obviously, they had a lot of trouble from their own governments. But what I then realised was that they were setting up an enormous global programme around all this. And obviously the Chinese Communist Party must have been involved in something as big as this. And obviously without the British government, they had to give up. And they gave up. And I got a letter from the chairman saying, this is not your fault, Richard. You did really well. It was a pleasure to work with you, but I'm very sorry we can't continue. And that was that. So it was a bit of a disaster. I mean, how the hell do you solve that one? And we simply couldn't do. It was an awful, totally awful situation. So what we decided to do was, and it was one of the team's idea, which is a really good one, which was basically to run the car at Newquay Airport and invite all our friends from the Mat Wine Club, from the Supporters Club, from the schools, etc. And 10,000 people turned up. It was a very, very special day.
Excitement that we've had over the last 3 weeks with the general public, I think they're going to be blown away.
absolutely loved it today. It's just amazing seeing the car finally run.
Okay, well, huge value to the country in terms of this education. You can see that it's really got real process and strength and opportunity and so on. And thanks to the Minister of Defence who came up with the idea, a very smart idea. And basically, in terms of publicity, the YouTube views were over 81 million, and Bloodhound was being followed in 200 countries. But for me, the project was over. With no more funds, the project had to be sold. And my part was over. I'd put 50,000 hours into this over 12 years. And what do we do now? Well, we'll tell you in a moment. But there was one more extraordinary thing to happen. Ron Ayres and I used to have a curry evening together. I don't know, once every 2 or 3 months, something like that. Pretty regular, but it was a way of distressing and talking about it all, etc. And I had one of these dinners with Ron, and the subject went round to the Chancellor's programme. And for Bloodhound, of course, Ron was responsible for all the aerodynamics and all the performance calcs and all the performance predictions. He was Mr. Bloodhound. It was really simple as that. And he said to me, "Do you know, Richard, the civil servants never bothered to interview me. They obviously had no idea whether Bloodhound was viable. And that's the source of the problem. That's probably what caused it all." That's extraordinary, isn't it? But Ron's a guy who never, ever lied, was absolutely, totally honest. And he was very upset about it.